Hello everyone, welcome back. Ashley here with Tolton Art. Today I am going to give you some of my best tips for painting realism. I've made this video before, I've touched on things before, but I never really dove into deep detail on some of these concepts. So let's sit down, get cozy, and let's have a nice little art chat. So, you want to paint realistically. Well, I think it goes without saying, one of the most important things is proportions. Getting your first drawing right and looking correct is going to serve you in the long run. How you get better at that is honestly just a lot of practice. We could dive into an entire series on how to draw correct proportions, but ultimately it just takes practice. But you can also use tools like grids or projectors or transfer paper. There's a bunch of things that you can kind of take a little bit of the hassle out of it, but nothing beats practicing drawing. So with that out of the way, you have a proportionally correct drawing. There's a few things to think about. One are your edges. Two is color / value, contrasts, and texture. These are all things that can kind of be molded in a way to create a very realistic painting. When talking about edges, you have the option to work with a hard edge or a soft edge. Soft edges are going to go further back into the background. Your eye's not really gonna get stuck on it. So that's a little bit of the photography bokeh sort of look, is the soft edges, versus a hard edge, which is very much going to draw your attention. You don't want every line soft, you don't want every line hard. And soft edges can help make things look like they are disappearing into the background, or that they have like shape to it. I think harsh edges should be used pretty sparingly and really only where you really want your attention to be drawn to. Then with color. Color is also incredibly important for that atmospheric look and great depth in your paintings. Things that are further back are going to be way more muted. Things that are further forward and things that you want to draw your attention to are going to have a higher chroma. I would say when painting realistically, things are always more muted than you think they are, which is a really interesting concept. When we look at real world, we kind of, like our mind, when we want to paint these beautiful things, we want to add more color to it because we're like, yes, but in reality, when you really analyze it, things tend to be way less chromatic than we think they are. A really good tip for understanding color is if you have a reference image that you're working with, put it into something like Photoshop or Procreate or anything that can have a color matcher. And I challenge you to match a certain color in the painting and then look on the color wheel where it is as far as like how chromatic it is, how muted it is, and what color it actually is. It's fascinating, and you can learn so much by doing that. This painting's a really good example of color, so you can kind of see in the back how gray those colors really are, and as you get further forward, that has a bit more color, and then here has a lot more color. This is where this foreground is where all the color is, versus those mountains in the back, which are, like I said, basically gray. So on that same note is value, and value is a bit more like the grayscale idea. So, 1 to 10, and 1 is basically white, 10 is black, and everything in between. Value is important because it kind of relates to color in a sense. It's not, it is different, but it kind of tells you how dark or light something should be. And if something is all, if a painting is all of a similar value, it's gonna look really flat and really stamp-like. And the more dynamic range you have on that value scale, the more realistic it's gonna look. And that really takes understanding where your darkest darks are, where your lightest lights are, but especially with those midtones. Midtones are so nuanced and tricky, and that's really where the magic lies. My best tip for understanding value is to do thumbnail sketches and also to look at your reference image in black and white. That can give you a good understanding of exactly where the light and darks are and where certain midtones belong. And you can also take a photo of your painting and look at it in black and white and evaluate the values. Contrast is kind of a side note because contrast also relates to both color and value. Understanding contrast is, to me, a little bit more diving into the composition aspect of painting. I do think that when painting realistically, things have less contrast than we think they do. Again, the world tends to be a bit softer and more muted than what our minds want it to be. I would just make sure that you're painting what's actually there, not what you want to be there, unless it is a stylistic choice. But the last thing is texture. And you can use texture to kind of make your painting interact with the real world, in the sense where maybe you've heard it before, but you keep your shadows quite flat and smooth and your areas of light textured. And the reason for that is because in the light areas, if there's a lot of texture to it, it'll pick up ambient light, and any little like divots and rises that you have on the canvas will also catch light and add even more kind of dimension to the whole thing. The same thing can also go for background versus foreground. If you keep the background a little flatter and smoother and things up front, you kind of have the paint a bit textured. It can add a real sense of realism. Foliage is a perfect example. If I'm painting trees in the far distance, I want it to be smooth, and any foliage that's up front and center, I'm gonna lay the paint on there pretty thick, and it's just gonna give it almost this like tactile sense of realism. This painting is also a really good example of texture because you can see how smooth that shadow area is and the background, how smooth that is. Versus up here in the subject, the paint is way chunkier and thicker. So again, smooth background and shadows, texture in the foreground and light areas. I know I didn't go into great detail on each of these things, and ultimately I think there's really, really wonderful YouTube videos out there of people going into the depths of each of those individual topics. And maybe that's more so what this video is for, is just to give you some guidelines of what to learn more about and to study in order to help you, because there are people that are very, very good at explaining it and showing examples. This is a bit more of an intro to just give you some focus of what to learn, what to practice, what to think about, and it can provide a little bit of guidance on what maybe to look up. Every single one of these paintings show in the background, it's soft edges, very muted color, and the subject has hard lines, very chromatic color, the more dramatic value shifts, and more texture. Same with this one. Soft edges in the background, hard lines in the foreground, or in the subject. Very minimal value shifts in the distance, and very dramatic, high contrast values in the area that I want your eye to be drawn to. Low texture in the background, high texture on the subject. This painting is another one that can show you soft edges in the background, very muted colors, low dynamic range in the values, and low texture in the background. In the foreground and in the subject, you get hard lines, very chromatic color, dramatic value shifts, and high texture. Okay, I hope those examples helped clarify a little bit, but as always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Let me know if you have any more questions. I will try to either answer or make another video to answer it or clarify anything. Honestly, these tips are just going to help you be a more accurate painter, so you can, even if you're painting abstractly, it'll help you convey your message with that much more knowledge. But these are my tips for painting realistically. I hope you enjoyed. As always, happy creating, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.